Thank you, and thank you to all of you for being here. Let me begin by saying that we are in a very interesting moment. On the one side, it is a difficult moment. We have, as Barbara Musik has reminded us, 1 billion people who are hungry. We have increasingly large agri-food corporations dominating the food systems without any adequate regulation and increasingly concentrated. And we have increasingly volatile markets on agricultural commodities. On the other hand, it's a time of hope, because the crises are such in the area of trade, in the area of climate, in the environment, in the area of finance, that there is no choice but to rethink alternative scenarios. And it's very interesting to see that different systems are now being questioned. They have to open themselves to new values. For example, the World Trade Organization cannot ignore anymore the impact of trade liberalization on climate change and on human rights. Climate change negotiators cannot ignore anymore the food security dimensions of what they are negotiating and the human rights impacts of adaptation and mitigation strategies. And we have more constituencies working together. Development organizations work with human rights NGOs, and they work with environmental groups. And these different civil society movements have been disconnected for many years, but today they are uniting in a search for alternative scenarios. And so this is why this conference is so important, and this is why it is meeting with such large interest. Now, my role today was to essentially discuss the future impact of agricultural trade on the right to food and food security. And I emphasized that governments in developing countries are today at the crossroads. They are in a very difficult situation because they are facing a dilemma. On the one side, they know, and we all know, that the current trade system does not work for their benefit. They know that in the current trade system, their producers are facing both tariff and non-tariff barriers, making it very difficult for them to have access to the high-value markets of OECD countries. They know that their producers face unfair competition, heavily distorted by very high levels of subsidies given to the producers from OECD countries. And they know that they face tariff structures which make it very difficult for them to diversify into higher added value products and to shift from producing raw commodities to producing manufactured products and selling them on the global markets. On the other hand, despite the very important problems with the current trade system, they know that it is not for them a solution to have simply more trade liberalization. They know that this will only increase the existing international division of labor, which locks them into the production of raw commodities, in which their comparative advantage is essentially in remaining poor, in having low wages paid to their producers. They know that in the current system, and if it's perpetuated, northern-based large companies will benefit increasingly, and small farmers and producers in developing countries will be further marginalized. And they know that they will be increasingly vulnerable to price shocks if they increase their dependency on international trades. And so we need to basically offer alternative scenarios to the deepening of the existing system, or the mending of the existing system, with all the negative impacts which it may imply, although it has to be mended. And to do this, I believe we have to work on two levels. One being to ensure that trade works for development, and the other being to ensure that small farmers in developing countries, who form the majority of those who are hungry today, have alternatives to joining global supply chains, and that they have local and regional markets to which they can contribute and from which they can gain more prosperity. Now, I made a number of proposals concerning each of the levels. International trade can be reformed in order to be more sustainable and to be more equitable. And I made a number of proposals concerning how to support small farmers in developing their ability to produce, but to produce for the local and regional markets and not simply for the large agro-export chains. I think the main problem for the moment is that as a result of 30 years of mistaken policies, small farmers in developing countries have no choice. Either they remain marginal and poor, relegated to subsistence agriculture, or they become bigger and they join the large global supply chains. We need to give them more choices, we need to give them alternatives, we need to rebuild the systems on which they depend for their livelihoods. And I'm delighted to be here and to take your questions if there are any. Thank you.